All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. You are in the panel Stories of Transformational Leaders. We're going to shine a spotlight on those who are succeeding in leading their agile and DevOps adoptions and digital transformations. And we're going to dive into the stories of these 4 inspirational leaders as they provide their insights on what it means to make an impact, what it means to be a leader, and the lessons they've learned that have shaped them into who they are today and how that has helped them in leading today's complex digital transformations. It's my pleasure to introduce the following panelists. On the screen, you can see their titles and some quotes that they have used to guide their leadership style. By the way, I'm Becky Scott. I'm your moderator. I'm head of technical community and advocacy at JumpCloud. And here are our panelists. We've got Jim Marascio. Jim founded and runs Equals 11, a US-based Salesforce consulting partner with engineers throughout Latin America and Europe. And the quote we have on the screen for him is, "Structure creates freedom." We have Dr. Ken Russell, an author, technologist, and Chief Information and Innovation Officer for New College Institute, a state agency in the Commonwealth of Virginia in the US, helping bring innovation to the intersection of education and technology. And his quote, "We should all endeavor to become one on whom nothing is lost." And that's a paraphrased quote from Henry James. Rick Farenhorst. He is the CEO of DASA and has been working in different kinds of roles, companies, and domains. But the 2 main themes have surfaced over his career: helping organizations get more value with IT and digital, and a passion for learning, knowledge sharing, and continuous improvement of himself and the teams, companies he's worked with. He likes to challenge himself and the status quo. And his quote, "The best decisions in business and life are made with heart, intuition, and guts, not analysis," adapted from a quote from Jeff Bezos. And Alejandra Zertuche, she's the CEO and founder of Influx, the analytics and decision support system revolutionizing higher education. Influx maximizes faculty efficiency, boosts student retention, and significantly reduces the workload and risk associated with accreditation compliance. And her quote by Benjamin Franklin, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're very excited to have you with us. Now, I'm going to ask you all in a few words to tell me a little about yourself and tell me what comes to your mind when you hear the term leader. Ken, I'm going to start with you.
Well, thank you, Becky, and thanks to all you guys that are on this esteemed panel. It's great to be with you guys. It's just amazing that to be with you guys. But when you say leader, Becky, I kind of go back to the new book that we have. A leader listens, and they pay attention. Listen is actually an acronym, so I'll run it through you really quickly here. They learn, they interpret, they shape what they hear, so they can transform, evolve, and most importantly, nurture. You can't really be a leader until you have become a manager and learn how to manage, including when you manage in a crisis. And then finally, being a leader means being thoughtful and capable and willing to share your leadership and experience. Remember, it's not what you know, it's what you share.
Nice.
That's great. Thank you. And Rick, how about you?
Yeah, I think echoing what Ken just said, for me, to be able to listen, I think you also need to be sufficiently authentic and intuitive. For me, that means acting from the gut and the heart and less from the head. And it's something took me quite a journey myself to get used to this and do it more often. Being having a PhD background and are really trained in rational environments, do a lot of thinking, maybe even overthinking. It's new. It was new territory to actually, stop following those signals and listen more to your heart and the gut. And I know by experience now that following and trusting your gut, making decisions based on that is extremely powerful. So that's for me how I would define leadership as well.
Great. And Ale, what about you?
I mean, I agree with what Ken and Rick mentioned. I think about listening and being authentic. And then in addition to that, because sometimes some of us, like me, are put in the leadership position without having the opportunity to previously manage a big group, right? So what do? Yes, you're authentic, you listen. But I feel like when I hear the word leader, it's also about someone that can see the vision and the clear steps to get there, to get to the goal, but with a team that understands that it's not by yourself, but it's going to require a team. And if you have a team, you need to have integrity, you need to have determination, because anytime you doubt yourself, the team is watching and they'll doubt the vision. You need to listen to them, you need to be authentic, and you need to take action. And sometimes there are some decisions that are really hard to make, but you have to make them. So I think that's what comes in mind when I hear the word leader.
That's great. Thank you. And Jim, bring us home.
Yeah, that was all great information. What I like to start by questioning who's deeming somebody a leader. A lot of times people will step up and say, I'm a leader, or somebody gets promoted into a role and they're told you're a leader. And the reality is in a lot of cases, that's not true. I think you're not a leader until people are choosing to follow you. So you've got to always kind of step back and take a look over your shoulder and say, am I doing the right thing? How am I not necessarily inspiring, but creating the vision that Ali talked about, to see if people are going, is it resonating with people? Are people aligned with where you're going, and do they want to follow you? And I think that's really critical at the outset. Everything everybody else has said, but validating that and letting people tell you you're the leader, not because they want to follow, not because you say you're the leader.
It's really interesting that you say, do they want to follow you, Jim? That's a really good consideration.
If they don't, then they're not. I don't care what you're called.
That's true. That's true. Well, now oftentimes we talk about making an impact as a leader. So let's talk a little bit about what making an impact means to each of you. And I'm going to mix it up just a little bit. I'm going to start with you, Rick.
Yeah, I think often people think with impact that focus on tangible results in projects, for example. But when I think about impact, I focus more on the kind of impact you have on other people. It can be by inspiring them, allowing them to grow, learn from mistakes, etc. And it's very hard to predict. For each person, it's different what kind of leadership tactics or behavior you can employ to actually make people grow and inspire them, take them along on your journey. But it's also what makes leadership fun and exciting, I would say. For example, last week I had a session with an ex-colleague. I hadn't spoken to him in 5 or 6 years. I was his business unit manager at a small consulting firm, IT consulting firm, years ago. And he was explaining to me how much he had learned, apparently, from the conversations with me at that time. And while he was saying that, and I was listening to all the other achievements and the great roles he now plays, it really felt rewarding for me, because it was never really with intent that I was trying to mentor him just to make him more successful or something, but seeing how other people grew and give that feedback that apparently I helped in that journey, that was something very impactful, I would say. So that is what comes to mind first.
It's nice when it's a surprising impact and it's a positive one.
Yeah.
Ken, what about you in making an impact?
Yeah, I kind of see a trend developing here. It is really about the people. So, there's always a leader effect, good or bad, that happens when a leader emerges into an organization. Sometimes a leader's real goal is not really revealed or out there at any given moment. But the most successful and impactful leaders, I think, are the ones who choose to involve others in the organization, pay attention to the folks around them, and take the time to avoid ivory tower kind of situation, or what we call star chambers. And those who are the most resilient or capable are the ones that are capable of being the right leader at the right time. So sometimes situational leadership is used for that. And I'll give you one quick story about that. I think the best way for a leader to do that is what we used to call management by walkabout, just kind of walk among the troops. And I've got a really great story. So if you want to read your Shakespeare this weekend, read Henry V, because that's our best example. When Henry V was walking among the troops before the Battle of Agincourt, he walked among the troops. But then you say, well, gosh, if he's the king walking around everybody, don't they change how they communicate? And that's true. But what Henry did that was so amazing in the Shakespeare version of this is he kind of put a cloak on. So he was walking around everyone without them knowing that he was the king. And that's a technique you can use. I don't know if you would be recognized if you were walking around your guys with a cloak on or something, but you get the point. Just find a way to walk among folks without that extra pressure they have of trying to impress you as a leader.
Nice.
All right, great. And Jim, we're going to bounce over to you.
Sure, I want Ken to show up at the next one with a cloak and
There you go.
crown, and okay, yeah, we're different costume for next time. No, I think, again, there's a theme here. I'll step back again and say, you can lead people, but if you're leading them in the wrong direction, it's sort of like inspiring people who maybe shouldn't be inspired and motivated. If it's important to be outcome focused, and I tend to be somewhat objective in a lot of things, and I think you need to step back and say, okay, what are we trying to achieve, and how do we build the right organization, the right team, the right process, and motivate people toward those outcomes. And from a leadership standpoint, one of the things I learned, again, just on the theme of giving examples, early in my career, I was late 20s, mid 20s, something like that, and I was able to be entrepreneurial in a large 75-year-old organization where I came up with an idea, and I was fortunate to have leadership above me basically say, that's a great idea, we want you to run with it. What they were saying was, Jim, we want you to lead this, but I didn't realize that at the time. And they were very encouraging. They allowed me to make mistakes. They allowed me to stumble, and at the same time say, okay, what did you learn from this? How are you going to correct it? And as a 20-something that didn't realize I was leading, it was wonderful really to be in that environment that was supportive and encouraging, allowed me to make mistakes, but also had a very clear goal and vision that I had to move people toward. And I think that's really important to create that type of environment where people are encouraged and given that goal, allowed to grow and allowed to make some mistakes, in a safe way.
Yeah, I think being able to make a mistake and learn from it rather than being castigated is incredibly important.
Yeah, just don't repeat the same mistake. So,
yeah,
you learn that
exactly.
one.
Yeah. All right. And Ali, what about you? What about making an impact to you?
There's a lot of synergies. I thought it was interesting that the question is saying, like, what does making an impact means to you? And it can be both ways, right? What does it mean to have a negative impact or a positive impact? And I think that the difference is, like Jim said, if we have a clear goal and vision, then you understand that an impact is not about the immediate outcome of a decision or of something to happen, but it's about the long lasting effect of a decision or of an activity or anything like that. So meaning it's about creating meaningful and lasting positive changes. And if you think about it that way, then you allow yourself and others to make mistakes, because mistakes can be corrected. And it's all about, can you correct that mistake so that you can still achieve your goal and vision? And the answer is yes, you can. There's always room for continuous improvement. Examples is at Influx, we convert data to insights because educators have massive amount of data. And then we help them identify students at risk. That's one step. But if they, what's the impact of that? If the faculty just meets with the student and tells them you're at risk, there's no impact. You might feel like it's successful because you told the student they're at risk, but it's about the goal and vision. And the goal and vision is to make sure that the students are prepared to practice when they graduate from the program. And in order to do so, you need to tell the student you're at risk, and this is why you're at risk. These are the areas or the competencies that you're struggling with, and this is what we need to do next. That's where the impact is. So for me, it's about, like I said, it's about focusing on the goal and vision so that you are making sure that you're focusing on long-lasting positive changes.
Becky, can I
Yeah.
comment on something that Ale just said?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you said it, but I think you kind of breezed over something about a feedback loop. And when you think about Agile, closing that feedback loop is so critical. And I think when you're leading and you're measuring and providing feedback, if you want people to evolve and evolve quickly, you need to shorten that feedback loop. It's going to ensure or help reduce the number of mistakes people make, or significant mistakes. You're allowing them to make smaller mistakes in helping them to grow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
Ali's right too, because continuous improvement means continuous communication. So
Yeah.
to Jim's point, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny you mentioned the feedback loop, Jim, because that was actually what my talk was on earlier about continuous improvement and closing the feedback loop, and how important that last bit of feedback on how you're using people's feedback and what's happening with it is that most critical piece, because a lot of people will take in the feedback, they'll do something with it, but they never come back and say what they did with it. So you're just left hanging.
Yep.
And I think that's a really big piece of it. All right, so next, leaders often grow into their positions and they face challenges along the way. And so I want y'all to describe a time when you grew as a leader, and maybe tell us an experience that made you the leader you are today, and maybe even opened your eyes to what leadership is really about. And I'd like you to provide a time in which you made an impact. And we're going to take a little bit longer for each person to kind of give you a chance to go a little more in depth. And we're going to mix up a little bit more. And Ali, we're going to let you go first on this one.
Thank you, Becky. Well, my story is kind of unique. I spent 5 years as a director of assessment at a pharmacy school. And through those 5 years, I got multiple degrees because I was trying to figure out how can I find a solution that can help all the schools have what we have in this program, which was something I was building, converting data to insights and having that decision support system that is going to help them take action when needed, and that they can document everything in a accreditation streamline. So I spent a lot of time, like I completed my MBA in information systems, and then went through a master in statistics, and then a master in biomedical informatics. So I was preparing, but I didn't know when the opportunity was going to show up. Then after 5 years, Enflux found me on LinkedIn and offered me a job as a senior BI analyst. And I joined them because I was like, oh, if I join them, I can learn how to start how to build my own startup and then take it from there. What Enflux was doing, it was social media analytics to find influencers for luxury brands like Chanel and Hunter Boots and things like that. So I joined them, and within 3 months, I had to tell them that I needed to go to a conference to present my work that I was doing with universities. And that's where they're like, can you tell us more? What do you mean your work? And I said, well, I wasn't planning on leaving the school, so I already accepted this presentation. So when they learned what it was, they were like, oh my God, that's really incredible. What if we start this in here? What if we start building it? So I went and presented to a large state university, and the university was like, I can't believe that you're showing me this. This is awesome. I've been asking 1,000 questions. I don't get any answers. And all the answers are in your reports. When can we start? So we got our first contract within 6 months of me joining the company. And that's when I became VP of the company, but I was doing both. I was still working on the social media project and the academic project. Then 6 months went by, and we signed a couple of universities, and the founders decided to pivot. They decided to shut down one of the social media business and to start the academic business. But guess what? I was the one in charge of doing that. So that was a lot of pressure, because starting a business is hard, but shutting down one and starting another one, it's the most difficult thing. And like Jim said, like, you're a leader until people choose to follow you. I had a hard time. I became my boss's boss and their boss's boss. I became the CEO of the company, and I had to make hard decisions, and I had to let some people go, and it took me a while. It was a lot of pressure, but they were not aligned with the new direction. It's totally different to have people knocking at your door and saying, I love your vision, I want to join you, than having people saying, you need to convince me that your vision is right. It's like there's no time for convincing when you have a startup. So it was one of the hardest things ever. And I think the key actions is like letting go people that are not aligned with the new direction, communicating transparently with the investors and communicating with the team as well. And then hiring new team members and building a new culture, setting a clear vision, and it was hard, but I learned a lot. And I think the key learning was that there's I think it's a book that I read a long time ago that is called The Hard Thing About the Hard Things. And it's like, you have to make decisions, and right or wrong. Right decisions are awesome. Wrong decisions, you can still correct them. But not making a decision can be a lot more costly than making the wrong decision. So yeah, that's some of the challenges that I face. It was interesting. That was about 7 years ago, and now we're completely different. We're an amazing team. We have like close to 80 universities, and we keep growing.
Well, I bet that was really unexpected for you thought you were going to create a startup, and then you kind of did in a way, kind of reshaped it at least. So
And had to retire some of the founders. It was quite interesting. It was
that
not just the team members, but also the founders.
that would definitely be a challenge. Sounds like it worked though. Sounds like you all are doing a great job there. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Jim, how about you?
Sure.
What's
Yeah,
your story?
it's interesting. As I was listening to Ali, I was hearing a lot of parallels and things in my career. I'm an entrepreneur now and run a company. I've been through a lot of that. But I'll go back to that story that I introduced in the earlier question. So late 20s, mid to late 20s, working for, at the time, what was the largest commercial music company in the world. They provided music for hotels and restaurants and retailers all around the globe. And at the time, everything was still analog music. So we're talking 1990s, which basically makes me old. But so if you remember back there, for those of you who are around, Napster, MP3.com, and all the music piracy stuff was happening. And I'm sitting here at a 75-year-old company that's providing music to retailers and hospitality companies around the globe. And I said to the vice president I reported to, that's what they're doing, what Napster and MP3.com are doing, we need to do. We're already doing the stuff that they're in trouble for. We're already doing that legally. We need to leverage their type of technology. And immediately I was told, we can't do that. They're being sued. And I'm like, no, you don't hear me. We're doing that. The part they're getting sued for, we're doing right. So let's figure that out. So I think at that point, I didn't realize I was having a vision and a direction for something, but I was able to convince some other people that I was onto something. And very quickly, within a matter of weeks, I'm meeting with the CEO of the company and the CFO of the company and then the entire management team, and they give me $10 million to go build a new department that became a division of the company over time, and hire out staff, and basically it was kind of a safe environment to have a startup. And I didn't realize, again, I was being entrepreneurial, but I was. And back to that feedback loop, we made a ton of mistakes, but I was in a safe environment. I was being supported by the CEO and my VP at the time. And we built out what at the time was the largest digital music library in the world, pre-iTunes. And then we built an iPod before iPods and iPhones were things, and it was the size of a shoebox, but we built that out. And it was fascinating to go through this process. And again, not considering myself a leader at the time, but being continually encouraged, okay, go figure this problem out. and hiring a bunch of college students to rip CDs because the labels wouldn't give us music, the digital copies of the music, because they thought we were going to give it away on the internet, like the pirates. And so we ripped 2 million songs off CDs and hand entered all the data, because that was the only way for us to get it in a period of about 6 months. And we had to build out a content delivery network before CDN was even a term to distribute that, and had to build a media player and a CMS. And before content management system was even a term, we had to build out a CMS. And so I had to, okay, how do we solve this problem? And so throughout each iteration of this, it was always sitting down saying, okay, what's the vision? What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? What are the right types of people and businesses to work with in building out that ecosystem, and then sharing that vision with them? Hey, college students, we need to rip all this music in the next six months. And then, who's willing to work in the middle of the night to rip CDs and hand enter data? It was one problem after another. And I think at the time we were so focused on where we were going that it was just fun. Except when my pager went off in the middle of the night because some student didn't come in to
what? A pager? A what?
Pager? Exactly. This is, again, it's 1990s. Figuring out these things, like, we had to build, we spent $6 million on 6 terabytes of storage. I have 6 terabytes of storage in my PC in my office now that I spent $500 on or something like that. But we spent $6 million at the time because it needed to be done. Incredible. And but didn't, we factored everything except for the heat it would generate. What are all the problems? How much power do we have? Where do we store it? Mm-hmm. All this stuff. We've solved all those problems, and we turned the thing up. And 6 racks that each were a terabyte of storage took the room from 72 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and we had to shut everything down because we were going to ruin $6 million worth of infrastructure. And it was the next problem that we had to solve. But putting together a team of people that were excited to solve problems and were focused on the objective made it easy, I guess, to some degree. So back to Ali's comments earlier about how do we share the vision and get people inspired and aligned with the vision, and who fits and who doesn't, and making those decisions rapidly is critical. And I can go on and on about all the mistakes we made, but the good news is we made them fast, we learned quickly, and we adapted, and that has given me skills that I've been able to use throughout my career with other companies along the way.
Love it.
It's also a great story, Jim, that for me highlights that leadership is not a position. It's a lot about the behavior, the attitude. You mentioned several times that I was at that time not really conscious of being a leader, but we just did. We had the fun, excitement. I think it's kind of liberating as well to not be burdened with the formal role of being in charge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I think sometimes that's probably more fun than, being formally a leader, because you get more flexibility, you get to do things differently and think differently and things like that. And I really like that you mentioned the university students, because they're so fun to work with. And Rick, I don't know if you've worked with the university, but Jim, Ali, Ken, and I actually have too. So we've all got that in common, because I used to work for a university. It's really
they're creative. They don't understand
as well.
Yeah, they don't understand the barriers. Sometimes they come up with great ideas. They're willing to hustle, the good ones. It was a lot of fun.
Ali, you were going to say something.
I was going to say that it shows how being a leader is also raising to the occasion and people following you.
Exactly.
And it just happens naturally, right? They know that you have integrity, you know what the vision looks like and how to get there, and people follow you. And students are great to work with. They have so much determination, and but also when you have interns and they're working on projects, they're like, "I'll have it ready by tomorrow." I say, "Oh, wait. Don't kill yourself. It's not going to take a day. It might take a little bit more." So also being a leader is like helping them be a little bit more realistic, and also don't burning them out. But when you have a vision and something you want to accomplish, everyone will get behind it.
Their energy and excitement is incredible. And the difference on a campus from when they're in session and when it's like the summer and hardly anyone's on campus, the difference is palpable because they just lend so much energy to everything they do. It really is. I miss it at times, but other times I don't, because it can also be just a little bit intense. But it's also wonderful. So Ken, we're gonna move on to you, and then we'll have Rick round out the question.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think I'll transition a little bit here by saying this is a great spot to insert a quote. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm, right? And I think both in Allie's and Jim's presentations, it was like very evident that people were excited not just to be there, but just to be a part of something amazing. And I think that's where you really have your best success as a leader, is when everybody's enthusiastic. But you asked me to talk about the kind of thing that kind of made me who I am today, and kind of a story around that. And I've got one for you, and I'll give it to you. But after listening to Allie and listening to Jim, I've got to give you another one. And this one's actually in the new book that I think Jessica or somebody put in the chat. But this is the one where I had my first experience with a really great leader. Her name was Mary Pridgeon, and I was 15 years old, and it was at a music store. So Jim, you made me think about music, and Allie, you made me think about the kind of people that you encounter that you just have to get rid of or create a culture, that kind of stuff. And I'll make it really brief on this one. I'll get into my main one here in a second. But if you ever go to a music store, you'll see every kind of thing that you need to be successful in business: sales, support, office politics. It's all there. So to be a 15-year-old and experience all that, it was pretty amazing. And there's a good story about it in the book. But I've got to tell you, as a young executive a few years ago, I had the good opportunity to be on a cabinet with working very closely with the CEO. And this story is about, kind of learning and watching another leader. And she was smart, educated, credentialed, caring, had a good rapport with everybody. I mean, she was smooth until there was a problem. And this is what happens in some leadership situations, is that, there's a leader, and then there's the right leader for the situation, right? And sometimes it can be the same leader, but usually not. And unfortunately, in this case, she was not. And I think what was really difficult to watch in real time, it was almost like watching a train wreck or watching something, and it just happened in slow motion for me. So for me, it was very educational to watch, a really great leader kind of fail. Where there's a situation where, and I'll just kind of be as careful but as blunt as possible. There was a financial snafu, and it fell apart, and the resulting disorienting dilemma, which is I talk about a lot. She was disoriented, she was uncomfortable, and she had no experience with the bad part of being a leader. So she started making bad decisions. She started making poor choices with, not only the financial side, but the HR side. People were jumping ship. People that were thought to be colleagues and collaborators turned out not to be. And that's not unusual, really. I think when things go bad, you really kind of, it tests people's mettle. And it's the idea that, are you going to be there, or are you going to jump ship as well? Or are you just going to blow the whole thing up? And unfortunately, in this situation, it was ultimately disastrous for the organization. It did not succeed. And it took them years to recover. So in the aftermath, I've got some takeaways I can kind of share with you. And that's always take the time to understand your role as a leader. It's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, right? It's not always going to be the kind of thing that you walk into something and you can kind of plan your day and go, I'm the leader today, and I'm going to say leader. You need to listen, you need to pay attention, and you need to be aware of the different kind of leader you need to be for a situation, whether that's a transactional or a transformational, or what we like to call a transcendent leader, the kind of leader that can look above the fray and kind of get an idea of what's going on. You have to remember to lean on your experts. I always talk about this, folks, and it's this idea that you don't want a bunch of vendors hanging around when what you really need is partners. And I think we make that mistake as leaders a lot, where, sometimes because we're forced to take the lowest bid on a project, or the lowest, cost for some service or whatever else, we forget that we don't really want a vendor. We want someone who's going to be there with us when times get bad, because times will get bad. And that's when you want someone to kind of stand beside you and help you solve the problem. And then go back to what Ali said, you got to be a continuous learner. You got to always be ready to learn. You got to always be ready to just kind of, have a new idea, or lean on someone else for another idea, and just be present in the moment. Don't push away, don't pull away. And here's probably the last big part of this. And it's the idea that crises, not crisis, but crises will come, but they'll also go. And I think people forget about that. They encounter a crisis and they think the whole world's going to explode and that's it. And they're never going to see the sunrise again. But the sun always rises. And there's always an opportunity to try something over, try something different, try something new. So your leadership position, the reason you're there is because you're the leader. So don't forget the reason that you're in the position in the first place. And I'll leave you with one of the acronyms from the book, LEAD, LEAD. Listen, empathize, absorb, but remember that last one, D, discern. Take that moment to make those little decisions. It doesn't have to be a big transformational decision when the whole organization is burning down. Maybe a slight turn here, a slight turn there will get you where you need to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ken, I think you should paste the graphic in the chat that has the LEAD illustration in there for us. I think that'd be good.
I can do that.
Yeah. It's interesting that we have mostly talked about really positive things, and I think that's great. But I think sometimes we can also learn from the not so great examples. In fact, I think I've probably learned a lot more from some of the negative examples of leaders that I have had, and that has taught me what not to do, just as much as the positive leaders have.
Yeah.
So,
Ken, when you were talking at the beginning about the challenges that I think she said it was a woman was having, what you were speaking to was kind of the organizational culture that was being created. And you never use the word culture, but I think it's so important to create because you can have a negative culture or a positive culture. And you're going to have a culture, whether it's intentional or not. So you might as well be intentional about it and try to do those right things, because you will run off good people if it's not the right culture. And you were kind of touching on that when you were saying people were leaving the organization. It's really important to be aware. And unfortunately, so many people are not very self-aware.
Oh, you're right about that. In fact, we often talk about, in my work, because I'm a technologist, we talk about technical debt and what we have to do to maintain technical debt. But we always fail to realize that there's a cultural debt too 100%. That we must deal with. And I think that's a really great point. So thanks for bringing that out, Jim.
Yeah, that's really true. Your leaders are the ones that can either create a positive or negative culture. And I think that debt can actually have really long lasting consequences. If you don't cull those people and root out those problems quick enough, it can actually cause really long-term issues with your organization. I've seen that happen to where someone is left in place that's a jerk, but they're a high performer, but it actually slowly, starts rotting the culture, and people will either leave or they'll be very, very unhappy for a long time. They'll move around the org to try to get away from that person. It's not fun to work there, is it?
I left the organization for that exact reason. It was that and an indecisive CEO. Back to Ken's D and lead. You said discern, but when you're working with somebody who won't act because it's either paralysis by analysis or they're indecisive, it creates a difficult environment for everybody else, because things get hung up and stalled, and it frustrates and creates stress for the organization. So being action oriented and decisive is critical, and not keeping those people that are effectively a cancer to the organization around. Get rid of them, even if they are high performers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, we still want to
Yes.
hear your perspective about your growth as a leader. So it's your turn.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so many nice things that trigger me, so I'll try to keep it brief. But one thing worth mentioning, what Ken just mentioned, this LEAD acronym really resonates, because it starts with listening. And my story, it was not just listening to colleagues, although it was involved part of it as well. It's also listening, referring to the earlier quote, to the gut, or the informed gut, as Ken would call it. I will take you back 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago. I was CIO of a low-cost airline. Just 7-8 months into the job, I had to present the new plans, but also the budget for the IT department and innovation portfolio for the next year during a strategy day where all the senior business and IT leaders were present. And I had found in the months prior to that event that, well, let's say the state of the IT landscape wasn't superb, to say the least. But I also found that the business leaders were not really aware of this fact, because probably my predecessor kept them in the dark, or he simply didn't know that much detail. So I wanted to really make a point, and I built a big plan with lots of details, activities. I had lots of energy. It was a 20-page document that outlined all the steps, and I got already some feedback from colleagues who said, well, Rick, be careful in this organization. You might have a hard time convincing the senior leaders of this plan, because they perceive IT as a little bit more boring, something that should just work, and they don't realize the strategic impact it might have on the business, and also in enabling them to realize their strategic goals. So I took this into account, but I still was convinced of that the plan needed to happen. So I just had finished 2 weeks of creating a lot of work and effort, blood, sweat, and tears into a PowerPoint presentation. And then the evening before the event, I had a 10-minute slot to talk. I basically decided to delete the whole PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to do it differently. I got a gut feeling that this was not the best way to convey the message, the story. So I was looking for a metaphor. I found a picture online, and I decided to use just that picture for my presentation. It was a picture I found online about a house on the prairie, probably somewhere in the US, just after a large hurricane passed over that area. So the sun was shining again, but, well, let's say that there was not that much left of the house. So there were few walls standing, but no door, no roof, a lot of damage. So it was quite a horrible scene, like from a movie. And I had to recall that our CEO often during leadership meetings had said in the past that had to emphasize his strategic agenda. He said, you need to repair the roof when the sun is shining. And I used a variant of that quote during my pitch, and I led with it right from the start. I showed a picture on the screen, and I said, well, guys and ladies in the room, for the IT strategy and the task at hand, we need to do a little bit more than just repairing the roof. And that really made an impact. And after that, I just verbally, not using any slides, presented a few key activities and investments I wanted to do to fix the situation and to help the company. And not only got my budget approved without any hassle or question, even though it was double the size of the prior year, it also led the storytelling approach to some kind of momentum in the organization, because people remembered the quote, approached me even months later, talking about this analogy, this metaphor I was using. And I think it taught me not just to, of course, use storytelling techniques and different approaches to convey a message, but also, follow this informed gut, follow your senses in that sense, instead of doing the more rational thing of trying to convey your whole detailed plan in a more formal, structured manner. So that was, for me, very insightful, and it gave me confidence to do, well, similar kind of things in the years after. And that shaped me a little bit as a leader, I would say.
Wow, that's really great. That's awesome. Well, we still have a good amount of time. I'm going to hold on the closing key takeaways, and I'm going to look at our Q&A because we have some good questions in here. And I want to give everyone a chance to answer some of these. So Dheeraj has a question about how relevant and effective is servant leadership in the modern leadership era? And I'd like to give any of you who want to answer that time to do so.
I'm the quiet one, so I'll chime in right away. I think it's absolutely critical. I think if we look around this group of the 5 of us, we're probably all in our roles because we had somebody that was a mentor, somebody that was inspiring us, somebody that was serving us, and we didn't even realize that's what they were doing. And so I think as a leader, it's our responsibility to identify those people within our organizations that need that poke, that prod, that inspiration, that direction, and will respond favorably to it and do that. So 100%, it's in order, none of us can do it on our own. And in order to do it, you have to be a servant leader to those people that are working with and for you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Although sometimes I've seen leaders interpreting this definition of servant leadership a little bit too literal and trying to be facilitative all the time. And depending on, let's say, the majority of your team or the company, other types of behavior is sometimes also warranted. I learned at least being more situational in that sense and be clear on what's the bigger goal, the direction, the BHAG, if you will, and that can provide a lot of clarity as well. So as long as it isn't literally defined as being supportive and facilitative all the time, I'm completely in agreement with what Jim just said.
Yeah, accountability is important.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't go so far as to you being like a doormat at some point or an enabler. Yeah, because you have to be the decision maker when it comes down to it. Ali, what were you going to say?
So, yeah, I was going to say that it's important to know that being a servant leader doesn't mean that you have to make everyone happy, because you're going to fail completely. And I can give you a great story. We have 2 SDRs, one that both of them were performing. One of them was not performing well, not following up with things. It was almost like we were always trying to figure out what was wrong, what can we do. The nicest guy ever, amazing guy, but he was not, you couldn't see his behavior fitting in any other position. So we had to let him go. The other SDR reached out to us and said, I got tired of cold calling. And who doesn't, right? They have an expiration. Got tired of cold calling. But she was so detail oriented, so determined to learn. I just told someone, what can we do so that we keep her? Where do we need her? Can she help us with this? Can she help us with that? So we kept her, and she started helping us with a lot of things, including invoicing. And because of making that, it was about, she had the right cultural fit to help the company grow, that it made it a priority for me to figure out how do we keep her so that we help her grow. And it's about empowering her, but it had a huge impact. She's learning a lot of new things, and she improved our cash flow drastically, and a lot of other things. So I think it all goes back to the vision and mission. What are you trying to achieve, and how does those team members fit that? And if they fit and they have the right, it's not just skills, it's also trends and behaviors and gifts. How do you make it a priority to keep them in the team and invest in their growth?
Yeah, very true.
And I don't have much more to add to that, other than say that there's a place for servant leadership. Certainly there is, but I probably would couch it as more of a thoughtful leader approach, where you're the leader you need to be for the moment. And even that goes back to what Jim Collins was saying 30 years ago, this idea of being a quiet leader and things like that. You need to be the leader that is required. That, as to kind of paraphrase was it Harry Potter, be a leader of requirement, and just be what you need to be, and educate yourself, continuously learn, and don't be a doormat. I love that line. So whoever said that, we got to write that one down and publish that one.
Maybe for the next book, right?
Yeah.
John has a question. as a leader, I'm excited about evolving the culture and mindset of the leadership team. But then I find that my fellow leaders want to stay in the current state. What advice would you provide? Some of the reasons why the existing leaders did not want to evolve is it would require them to actually lead, listen, emphasize, absorb, discern.
Yeah, I think people tend to gravitate to what they know. And I'll use that word in another way too, the gravitational pull that people experience in their roles. It's difficult to achieve escape velocity for whatever reason. Maybe it's the money, maybe it's the cushy job, maybe it's the habit or the routine. You have to be able to shake people away from that. And I don't mean literally pick them up and shake them. I mean to disorient them, as I said before. And shaking works too, Becky. I'm just saying.
No, fear of change, right?
It's the fear of change. It's the fear of something different. And again, I use these aeronautical terms, this idea of escape velocity. One of the most difficult things for us to overcome going to the moon was not the distance between here and 200 some odd thousand miles. It was that critical bit where you had to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. And once we got past that, it was a little bit easier, right? So, but it's hard to John's point. I mean, the current state is sometimes very difficult to deal with. So I'll let my co-panelists here, add some more to this. But I think gravitational pull is definitely something you have to deal with.
I think it triggers me because in several change management frameworks, there's this concept of desire to focus sufficiently on creating something to long for in the new state. So a lot of the fear is because of all the things that were just mentioned about the cushy job or people getting used to work in a certain way. And although some might be better off by you replacing them, that could be one of the tactics to consider. I've had a few times in my career where if I would have followed the gut, I would have done that earlier with some of the leads in my team, because then we would have progressed sooner. But in many other occasions, it was also about sketching on the new horizon, the new state that we were going towards, and making it less something to fear, and then bring along those leaders and people in the leadership team, like John refers to in his question, to this, let's say, pot of gold at the other part of the rainbow, if you will. And I think that there are all kinds of tactics you can employ, but if that desire grows, people can also turn from someone that is really against the change and resist into a believer and even an ambassador. And that's also a kind of impact if you turn them into evangelists. That can be a powerful mechanism as well.
Yeah. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes. I think we've got time for one more quick question, and then let everyone give their closing statements. So really quickly, how do transformational leaders balance giving their team autonomy while providing necessary guidance and support? This is like lightning round for this one.
I'll take it. My quote at the beginning was structure creates freedom. I think if you've got a clearly defined outcome, a clearly defined process, clearly defined responsibilities, and you've got really good people then in the organization, you've created the rules to the game, and they can go play and have a great time and be the best of whoever they are within those confines. You just need to monitor at that point and measure.
Awesome.
Yeah, I call this freedom within a frame in one of the companies, one of the roles, and it's something similar. And it helped to also explain what the frame was. And then there's a lot of autonomy within those boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, guardrails is sometimes what we've called it in the past. Like you've got your guardrails, and then as long as you stay within that, then you've got space for some freedom. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'd like everyone to give a quick 1-minute summary of the key takeaways and what you want current and future leaders, especially behind today's high-performing digital organization, to take away from this. So 1 minute each so that we can do the outro and close on time. Who wants to go? All right, Ken, go.
Oh, I knew you were going to pick me. All right. So see, the thing is, I got 1 minute. So here I go. So I've got to give you my main one, which is dent. So remember, and I'm paraphrasing Steve Jobs here. Remember, we're here for a reason. Steve Jobs says that, we're here to make a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why are we here? So that final acronym is DENT, D-E-N-T. Remember to disorient, find a way to extend what you're trying to do and navigate, and that'll help you transform. But I've got 30 seconds left, so I'm gonna give you a brand new one. And this is how it works, by the way, Becky. So I was really enthralled by what Rick was saying about, changing his presentation on the fly. And sometimes as a leader, you have to do that. So instead of doing 21 slides, you do one. That's pretty bold. That's pretty amazing. So my message to everyone is, yours is a valued voice. Remember to sing. Okay. And what does sing stand for? Now, I really just made this one up, so I apologize if it's not great. It's be a storyteller. I is involve others. N is notice the invisible. And then finally grow. So SING. There you go.
All right. Jim, you've got to follow that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I need to go to Ken for all my acronyms going forward, because I don't think like that. So
He does them all the time.
yeah, I've seen that. A couple quick takeaways. One, I think it's so important to paint that vision and be outcome focused. If you can align everybody on the desired outcome, the probability of getting there is so much easier. So focus there. The second thing is I mentioned this earlier, is create a safe environment. Allow people to explore, and again within some confines, but allow them to make those mistakes and close that feedback loop, so that they're little mistakes and they're mistakes that they can learn and grow from without deviating from the plan. I think all that's really critical.
Okay. Allie, gotta make it quick.
I agree with both of you. And I think primarily vision and mission, if you don't have those, then everyone is going to be lost, including yourself. I didn't know the value of it until you're actually working with a team. The other one is that you have to make decisions, whether right or wrong, you have to make them. Taking too much to make a decision could be more costly than making the wrong decision. And by the way, wrong decisions are just telling you what doesn't work and why it doesn't work that way. So you can always learn from them.
All right, Rick.
Yeah, I have 3 takeaways also based on the great discussion today. I didn't find an acronym yet, but I will call Ken in a second after the session. I think, first of all, trust your gut, also based on the anecdotes I gave, but simply, be more intuitive, don't overthink it. Secondly, also be bold in the sense that you should simply dare to lead, not be afraid. Even if you're an informal leader, just do, because it's often not clear at the start what will happen anyway, and that can create 2 nice outcomes. And thirdly, don't take yourself too seriously. I would advise and recommend to people, have a lot of fun. We talked about having fun as a leader and instilling in energy in others and yourself. I think that would also help to not be too rational and too serious about the job, because we're all humans and we do our best, and that is something that is seen by the people we try to influence.
Yeah, I think we've shown on this panel that you can have fun and enjoy yourself while still talking about a serious topic. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful panel, wonderfully done. Loved all the points. If you missed part of it, come back and watch the recording. We hope you have enjoyed today's panel, finding value and inspiration as you experienced 4 different lenses of leadership. Remember that adoptions and transformations are not just a destination, but an ongoing journey. The choices you make today as a leader shape the world for all of us tomorrow. On behalf of our guests and our DASA team here at DASA Connect 2024, thank you for joining us. Lead well, inspire your people, and have some fun while leading your adoptions and transformations. By the way, if you asked questions and we didn't get to it during the session, we'll try to add some answers in the chat after we are done, and you should still be able to see them after the broadcast is done. We actually still have about a minute, so we nailed that. Any last thoughts? Ken, did you come up with another mnemonic while we were?
You guys are embarrassing me now. But
You're so
sure, I've got
good
a bunch of stuff up my sleeve, right? So yeah, I like what Rick was saying. This idea of trust and just being who you are and believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been wonderful, y'all. Such great thoughts and insights. Yeah. Thank you all for everything. And we are almost out of time. So Jess, thank you for running everything in the background, and we will let the broadcast run out. And if y'all want to look at the questions in the background here, we can go ahead and maybe we can do, well, no, we've only got 10 seconds. I was going to say we could try to answer one really quick,
No.
but if you will stay after for just a moment, we'll brainstorm a couple of these questions and go ahead and get the answers in the chat there.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah, let's do.
Thanks, Becky.